So what I can remember the most from that day is just how it started. I was working here, so I'm an old guy, so I was still working here at the time. But the day started out normal. I don't remember anything up until we started to hear what was going on. A couple of teachers had a TV on in their room. This was way back whenever we had a 7-period day, so I think this was between, maybe first and second period. And I just happened to go into somebody else's room, and I saw they had the news on, and then all of a sudden here's the scene of one of the planes hitting one of the towers, and I didn't understand what I was looking at, and I'm watching this and trying to read the little crawl on the bottom of the screen, and it said plane crashed in Somerset County. Well, I was living in Salisbury at the time, and where the plane went down in Shanksville is very close to Salisbury. So I didn't know what was going on, and the bell rang to start the next period. I go back into my classroom, and everybody's kind of talking about it, so I turned my TV on, and then from that point on, everything just sort of stopped for that day. And everybody was glued to the TV. It was just really weird after that. I mean, even right now, I'm starting to get cold chills, because I remember. Biggest thing that I learned that you guys have never really been exposed to is that change, and feeling basically secure to all of a sudden now you're just as vulnerable as any other country.
So I would say what I remember the most about that day was the shock that people were jumping out of these buildings. I remember the reporters, as this was happening, thought that they were throwing chairs and smashing the windows with chairs. And when they closed in on it, you saw these were actual people jumping to their death because of the smoke and the fire. They were trapped above where the planes hit. And I think that, I still can't get that out of my mind. I still see that because the kids in the classroom were really shocked as well that day. And we also didn't realize it was over by 10 o'clock. As far as the 4 planes, we thought there would be another attack. Elementary schools, football stadiums. You just didn't know. Looking back, we can analyze it, we can study it, and now we know this is what happened, this is what took place. And if you ever get a chance to go to the memorials and listen to the people on their phones talking to loved ones, it's the last time they left these messages on phones to loved ones. It's pretty epic to hear that. There's something else I wanted to throw out. When the first plane hit, everyone thought, at least I know we did, that it was an accident, that there had been a plane that had crashed into the first tower. So the second tower, when the plane hit, a lot of us were watching it live. And I can just kind of tell you how shocking that is to know we thought we were going to watch a live rescue attempt with maybe helicopters, things of that nature, and guys coming down out of the air. And then to suddenly realize we are under a terrorist attack. This is not an accident. Today, it really hurts me to see what's going on in Afghanistan, because I think about what people have sacrificed in the last 20 years to keep the fight there in Afghanistan and not allow something like that to happen again.
So what I remember the most from 9/11, I was sitting here at my desk with Mrs. Dowds and Mrs. Martin, and I get a phone call from my mother, and she wanted to know if I was watching the television, and she just mentioned that the Twin Towers had been struck by 2 planes. So, of course, I live close. I ran over to my house, grabbed a real small television so we could, at least at that time, listen to the news. And then I remember I couldn't wait to get home because I wanted to, I just couldn't get away from the television. It was so sad and depressing, and you just have no idea what those, people went through. So I think students, what everybody needs to take from that day is just remember how important our freedom is here in the United States, and the pain and suffering that all these families have gone through. So enjoy each day and never take anything for granted.
So the morning of September 11th, I remember it was a beautiful morning. It was a crystal clear September morning. There was blue skies, and I was in 5th grade, and it was the beginning of the school year. And the morning was like every other morning. We went into class and we were in language arts, and we were getting ready to do a grammar assignment. And I remember my teacher, Mrs. Coyle, getting a call from the office to turn on the TV, and she turned on the TV to the news, and the first tower had just been struck by one of the planes, and I just remember mad chaos going on in New York City, and seeing people run and screaming, and by that time the second tower had been hit, and I remember sitting at my desk surrounded by my friends and just watching the second tower fall. And in 5th grade, we were so young, we obviously saw what was going on, but we understood and we didn't understand at the same time what was happening. And I remember my teacher breaking down and crying. Her father was a fireman, and she knew that he was going to be on call for whatever was needed. And the next day, I remember getting up, and my dad would take me to school, and we would always stop at a Burger King that was by our house. And I remember driving down the hill from our house, and again, the next day was a beautiful day. It was a crystal blue skies, and it was so weird because we did not see a single plane in the air. And all I remember is just silence for days afterwards, just stillness and silence. And that's something that I don't think I will ever forget moving forward, that when 9/11 comes around, just the sheer silence of that day and the days afterwards. And it's kind of cool at the same time to see how people came together after that day to support one another and to understand what we were going through. And again, that not understanding, but understanding at the same time, and the uncertainty of each day. And to really see America come together as one nation for months after 9/11 and years after 9/11.
So what I remember about 9/11 is, like, everything is so vivid for me. I was a sophomore at the time. I remember coming to school, and classes had gone canceled for the day. We all had to stay in homeroom that day, and basically we just watched the news the remainder of the school day. For me, the impact that this particular event had at that time was I could not get back home after school based on where I lived. We are very close to the Hoover Dam. This was back when I lived in Arizona, and the interstate had gotten closed because the Hoover Dam was something that they thought was a threat. I think the biggest impact that this has had for me and my family was my brother was in the military at that time, and due to all this, he ended up having to go to Iraq for 1 year and 3 months. But I don't know, it's funny to think about it now. In a way, just you don't realize how quickly things can change, which I think for students now, they kind of see a little bit of that with how COVID hit all of a sudden and all the changes that it's had for us.
9/11 seems like forever ago, and many of you weren't born, but I remember very clearly, as I do with several other critical, pivotal events within my lifetime. I remember clearly where I was. I was here at Northern High School. I was coming from room 108 where I taught, and a student, an unreliable source of information, I won't mention any names, stopped me in the hallway and said, "We're being bombed, there's stuff happening." And I was like, "Who told you this? You are lying." And I continued on and came into the office, dead silence, and TV's on, and I saw the second plane hit. And I get chills now, like I stood there just stunned watching this unfold. and I watched how people around me were impacted. I know one of our staff members lived in the area of Flight 93 and how he rushed out of here worried about his family. I had a student, my child, in elementary school, an accident, and I was so scared for him. And we were going through an awful divorce, and he was to go home to his father's. So I went home to my house and sat alone, terrified, trying to reach people that I loved. My brother was flying into Dallas. I was petrified, trying to connect to people I loved. And I guess the lesson out of all of that is to hold close everyone that you love dearly, to stay connected, to cherish your time together, and let them all know that you love them. I think that would be the message that I took away from that day. People matter the most.
So what I remember about 9/11, I was a student at Frostburg State, and I was a typical college student, so I usually wouldn't get up early in the morning. But for some strange reason, I ended up waking up at like 8 o'clock that morning, maybe a little before 8. And I decided to turn on the TV, and the news was on, and I never watched the news, but I was like, whatever, I'll just leave the news on. And I was watching when the news came on about the first plane hitting, and of course I couldn't turn the TV off after that, and I did see the second plane hit live, and I remember just thinking it was such a beautiful day. And I know I've heard this in everybody's story, it was such a beautiful day, and for something like this to happen when it seemed like the day couldn't be any better, I think was just such an odd juxtaposition. And I think what I'd like students to get out of this is what I've heard from some of the other members of our staff is just how precious life is, how precious the people around us are, how grateful we should all be for the freedom that we have in our country, for the people that fight for us every day, from first responders all the way up through our military, and the idea that we can truly come together as a country. We have that ability. It's up to us whether we do it or not. We've seen it happen, and it's unfortunate that it takes a tragedy for that to happen. But I remember after 9/11 just that amazing sense of pride in my country, and knowing that regular people were willing to risk their lives to help others. And right now it feels so shattered. As a country, we've become so politicized, and I just want us to be able to get back to that feeling of unity without a tragedy needing